Hey there, 5-1 Youth. Welcome back to the fourth and final video of our series on spiritual warfare, where we've been learning about what spiritual warfare is and how we can participate in it. In our last video, we talked about agreements, which is a common tool the enemy uses to rob us of our joy and prevent us from living the full, abundant life that God has called us to. And what is an agreement? Well, an agreement is an agreement that we make with spiritual evil. An agreement is like a contract that we sign with the enemy. But why would anyone make an agreement with the enemy? Well, as we've been talking about throughout this series, the way spiritual evil operates is through deception and trickery. And they deceive us into making these agreements to the point where we don't even know that we're making them. Typically, agreements get formed in moments of intense emotional pain. We talked about the example of a friend who betrays you in some way. They do something that really hurts you. And in that pain, the thought gets suggested to you that you can't trust anyone. And in your pain, you say, yeah, that's true. You really can't trust anyone. And boom, the agreement has been formed. You've signed your name underneath the contract that says you can't trust anyone. And this is so dangerous because now that the agreement has been made, it affects the way that you interact with the world. So the person who's made an agreement that you can't trust anyone, now when they make friends or meet new people, they're going to hold back. They're not going to completely let those people into their lives because they're operating under this assumption that you can't trust anyone, and so it's not safe to let people in. And now that person is missing out on all these deep, intimate friendships that they otherwise would have had except for this agreement. So I hope you see that agreements are dangerous. And so in this video, we're going to discuss how we break agreements so that they no longer have authority over our lives. And the first thing we need to acknowledge is that simply speaking the truth over the agreement is not enough to break the agreement. Simply repeating that it's not true that you can't trust anyone, that you can trust people. You might have an intellectual understanding that yes, that's true, but it's not enough to break the spiritual power of the agreement because the agreement has engaged your heart. Remember, agreements are formed in moments of intense pain. So there is an emotional component to the agreement that simply speaking the truth and having an intellectual head knowledge understanding that the agreement is false is not enough to actually dig into the heart and break the agreement. And so there's a 3-step process that we can use to break the agreement. And each step addresses a different component of what the agreement is. The first step addresses our responsibility, the way that we have become implicated in making the agreement. The second step addresses the agreement itself, and we break the agreement so that it no longer has authority. And the third step is addressing the spiritual evil that deceived us into making the agreement. So let's explore each one of those steps more in depth. The first step being a confession that we bear some responsibility, that we chose to agree, that we signed our name on the bottom of the agreement, that when that suggestion that you can't trust anyone was presented to us, we said, yeah, I agree with that. It is true, you can't trust anyone. We bear some responsibility for making the agreement. And the way that we can do this is agreements are always tied to moments of trauma. They are part of our story of our lives. And so we go back to that difficult moment when we first made the agreement, to keep using the example that we've been talking about, when that friend betrayed you. You go back and you confess that, yeah, when this person betrayed me, I was so angry and I was so hurt that I made the agreement that you can't trust anyone, and I take responsibility for that. And confession is always the first step towards restoration and redemption. So we take ownership of our responsibility in forming the agreement, and that's step 1. Now that we've done that, the next step is to address the agreement itself and to metaphorically tear it up so that it no longer has authority in our lives. And you can do this out loud. In fact, I encourage you to speak out these words. Go to a place where no one else is around so you won't be self-conscious, and say something like, I no longer wish to be bound by the agreement that you can't trust anyone. I tear it up and I dismiss it from my life. It doesn't matter what words you use. There's no formula to this. The important thing is that you express your will and desire to be free from the agreement. So use whatever words you want. You say, I don't want to have anything to do with this agreement. It's not true. It's a lie. Whatever it is, speak that out over the agreement and say that it no longer has power over you and you're done with it. You tear it up, so to speak, in terms of the metaphor. And the final step for breaking the agreement is now to address the force of spiritual evil that deceived you into making the agreement. Throughout the Gospels, Jesus confronts evil spirits and he casts them out. That's the language that is used. And as his disciples, as the people whose spirit, Jesus' spirit lives in, we also have authority to cast out demons. And so we turn and we address the demon, say, in the name of Jesus, I cast you out of my life and I send you away to judgment. And again, you can use whatever language is most comfortable to you. But it's important that you do it in the name of Jesus, because it's only because of God's power that we are able to do spiritual warfare. It's only because Jesus is alive in us that we have the ability to confront the forces of evil. So you address the evil and say, I rebuke you, demon. I confess that I, may have made that agreement, but I no longer want to be a part of it. I send you away in the name of Jesus. The specific language is not important. The important thing is expressing your will and desire to cast the demon out in the name of Jesus. So that 3-step method of first confession, acknowledging your own responsibility in forming the agreement. The second step of addressing the agreement itself and tearing it up and say it no longer has authority or power over you. And then the third step of addressing the evil forces that deceived you into making the agreement and casting them out in the name of Jesus. That's how agreements get broken. And don't be, expecting some crazy, experience when you do this. Oftentimes you won't perceive anything immediately different. But if you commit to this, you'll see that the way that agreement had been shaping your life by making you a less trusting person, by preventing you from, opening up, that those changes over time will start to take place because that agreement no longer has authority in your life. You've broken it. And again, it's important to remember that we can make agreements about pretty much anything. I've used the example throughout this video about that you can't trust anyone. But other common agreements are things like, I will always be alone in this world, or no one could ever really understand me, or I'll never have a good relationship with my dad, or me and my siblings will never get along. There's an infinite amount of different agreements that can be made, and we've all made them. As human beings who are weak, we've all fallen into this trap. Don't think that if you've made an agreement that you're somehow bad or that you've failed as a Christian. We all make these kinds of mistakes. The hardest part about dealing with agreements is identifying them, because as I've shown you, the process for breaking them is relatively simple. It can happen in a minute or 2 minutes. It's not some complicated thing. The hardest part of breaking an agreement is becoming aware that you've made that agreement. And so I encourage you to take some time and reflect on your life and think about those moments when you were most hurt, those traumatic times when you're most susceptible to make an agreement. And reflect on those things and ask yourself, did I make any agreements in those times? Did I start believing a lie because of all the pain that this experience caused me? Ask God to reveal to you where you've made agreements so that you can identify them and then break them using the simple 3-step process, which again is confession, breaking the agreement, tearing it up, and then casting out the demon in the name of Jesus. So I hope that this has given you a roadmap for how to identify and then break the agreement, and that this whole series has shown you that spiritual warfare is a reality. It's part of what it means to be a Christian. It's part of what it means to be a human being, whether you're a Christian or not. there is evil influence in the world. And as Christians, we are equipped with the ability to fight back against it. But whether you like it or not, it's out there. And so we need to have confidence and boldness of knowing that because God is on our side, we don't need to be afraid of these things. Sometimes when people talk about demons or those kinds of things, it creates an atmosphere of fear and apprehension. But be encouraged to know that the one who is in you is greater than the one who is in the world. And what that means is the Spirit of Christ is greater than the spirit of evil. And so we have nothing to fear from these things because God has given us the authority to triumph over them in the name of Jesus. Thank you so much for listening, and I'll see you guys in the next series.